In some discussions that we were having with them, it became clear that actually they were looking for a tool with which to program NATO's main activities, training events and activities. They were at that time using an Excel-based tool, and with that sort of thing, with an enterprise that's as big and as complicated as NATO, with all of the nations doing their various bits of training, it became apparent that actually we needed to have some sort of software-based system that would allow them to do that, and would allow them to do that in a sort of very dynamic and distributed system. Exonaut was procured by NATO as a commercial off-the-shelf, or I suppose one could say a sort of MOTS, a modifiable off-the-shelf, because that's what we're about. Exonaut is a very versatile, configurable system, and NATO were very interested in it because it enabled NATO to be able to look at their requirements, and then we could take Exonaut and develop it and configure it to match those requirements. The system we produced is something called the Electronic Military Training and Exercise Programme, and that's NATO's main exercise and activity scheduling tool. That's now out in all of the NATO nations and of the strategic headquarters and the joint force headquarters, and it allows nations and the NATO headquarters to plan and schedule all of their training activities. And it allows them to do it in a very distributed fashion. And so that's where the big savings come, because I think it allows, rather than having to get all the nations in to sit around a table and to plan and go through all of those exercises, they can now do it in a very distributed fashion. National capitals, people can sign into the tool, add the exercises. They can be moderated from wherever the system manager is sitting. At the moment, he sits in Norfolk, Virginia. It will transfer next year to Allied Command for Operations, SHAPE headquarters in Mons in Belgium. We were lucky enough to get the software accredited to both NATO Unclassified and NATO Secret. And the NATO Secret side has now allowed us to do a project with Allied Command for Operations, where we're starting to beginning to track NATO deterrence operations. So the intent there is really to see what's going on the within the partner nations, within the nations, and within the NATO command structure and NATO force structure, what activity is going on, and then match it to any potential opponent activity that is going on. So you can start to sort of track and ensure that actually, if you're doing something, it doesn't tip the scales in one direction or another. So you're doing it with a sort of an intelligent understanding of what else is going on in the world at the time. It allows users and indeed commanders and staff across the world, wherever you happen to be able to log in and see a single common version of the truth. And that's the great strength. So rather than having different versions on PowerPoints and Excels and all the rest of it, it's all in one place, and it's a common database which has got all of the details in it, and you can then exploit that database to whatever ends that you particularly have. So if you're a staff officer planning an exercise, it's very easy to go in and start planning the exercise. If you are a staff officer briefing a commander, you can use that tool set to do the briefing, as opposed to have to build additional sets of PowerPoint charts.